Calling the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Education to order. So this afternoon, we'll hear from the Department of Education, who will be presenting their supplemental budget requests. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair De La Cruz and Vice Chair Keith Algaran, Chair Kidani and Vice Chair Mercado Kim, and Senators. Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi. Thank you for the opportunity to share an overview of the Department of Education supplemental budget request. With me today is Deputy Superintendent Phyllis Onibasami and Chief Financial Officer Brian Hallett. Also online are our assistant superintendents who are available to answer any specific questions committee members may have. As Hawaii's public school system, the department is charged with developing the academic achievement, character, and socio-emotional well-being of our students to the fullest potential. We take seriously our mission to ensure all students are provided with the educational opportunities to reach their aspirations. Our budget request aligns and supports our ability to carry out this mission. For the department to effectively meet its obligations, schools need predictable and reliable funding to take care of basic needs, as well as the new needs created by the pandemic, which includes maintaining staff capacity in our schools. Stabilizing our base budget will support strategic and innovative efforts to meet student needs while mitigating education inequities among students. This will also allow schools to leverage federal relief funding to focus on 3 areas that have been brought to the forefront because of the pandemic. The first, health and safety. Ensuring the health and safety of our students and staff during COVID has been our highest priority. This includes securing PPE, sanitation, COVID testing, and additional dedicated health positions, such as nurses, certified nursing assistants, and medical assistants to help with COVID response. The second, social and emotional learning. The pandemic has taken a significant toll on the social and emotional well-being of many students and staff. Needs in this area include professional development on addressing the needs of our students and more counseling services. And third, accelerated learning. Our students' academic performance has been hard hit by the disruption caused by the pandemic. Needs in this area include professional development in math and reading instruction, high dosage tutoring, and summer and after school programs. Next slide, please. Our K-12 system supports economic and social development. Investing in public education has far-reaching implications on the health of our economy and workforce development. Starting to the left of this diagram, our public schools prepare students for college, career, and community success. We ensure graduates possess the attitudes, knowledge, and skills necessary to contribute positively and compete in a global society. As we move counterclockwise to the lower right, we find workforce development. Together with continuing education, it fuels growth, ensuring that employees have the competitive skills, knowledge, and attitudes to support current, emerging, and future businesses and industries. Then there is economic and social development. Investing in growing our economy and enhancing the prosperity and quality of life will enable all residents to journey towards their dreams with confidence and dignity. Strong economic and social development within our society then supports our K-12 system, beginning a new cycle. Next slide, please. Our vision for workforce readiness and the outcomes we want for all graduates are grounded by Nahopino Ao, or HA. The word HA in Hawaii means breath. We work together as a system to develop the competencies that strengthen a sense of belonging, responsibility, excellence, aloha, total well-being, and Hawaii, or breath, in ourselves, our students, and others. The yellow arrow symbolizes the student journey from early education to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, with each laying the foundation for the next. Schools within a complex work collectively throughout our students' K-12 journey to prepare them for life after high school. This blue layer represents our wraparound strategies, such as data systems, the Hawaii multi-tiered system of support, smaller learning communities, and literacy to facilitate student success. These strategies help us to individualize supports to best address student needs from early education through high school graduation. Thus, this layer surrounds the entire student journey. The orange layer, let's see, if you can refer to the, we're having a little problem with the slideshow. So if you can refer to the screen, the orange layer represents workforce readiness, which is most relevant to our secondary grade levels, but is also applicable to elementary schools. Having a strong connection between high school and workforce development requires a strong system that provides quality education opportunities for students to learn and grow. These include career pathways, internships and certifications, entrepreneurship, and college opportunities. Finally, the outer green line represents our outcomes. The general learner outcomes ensuring our students are self-directed, collaborative, effective, and efficient. Professional skills, ensuring our students are employable. Financial stability, ensuring our students are able to earn at least a living wage. And the culture of giving back, ensuring our students have heart, not just the smarts. These are outcomes for all students. This is data that you're all familiar with. I would like to point your attention to the percentages at the bottom of the slide. Our economically disadvantaged student population has been steadily increasing and currently stands at more than 50%. Prior to the pandemic, it was 47%. Our special education and special needs student population has also slightly increased to 13%. Thus, more resources are necessary due to the increased need for student support. Next slide, please. Student success continues to be our main goal. Our Strive High performance system remains in place to monitor student performance according to federal accountability requirements and the state adopted measures focused on student achievement, equity, and success. Our school year 2020 to 2021 Strive High results were released in October. The data reflects downward trends in academic performance seen across the nation as a result of the impact of the pandemic. On average, 88% of students were learning in blended or virtual environments last school year, where these performances results were captured. Thus, the overall results emphasize the importance of having students back in the classroom for in-person learning and inform our plans for targeted supports and resources. We know the pandemic has had and continues to have a major impact on student learning. Next slide, please. Federal funds continue to play an important role in supporting our public schools. Congress is still working on its federal fiscal year 2021-22 appropriations for education programs, thus the TBD. We anticipate federal funding for federal fiscal year 2022 for recurring federal programs will, at a minimum, be maintained at current levels. Next slide. The pandemic will continue to have a residual impact on the coming years, and the department appreciates the federal relief funds awarded to address critical health and safety issues, learning loss, and other impacts that jeopardize the stability of public education. The federal relief funds were used to help maintain school and complex level budgets in fiscal year 2022 and 2023. During the last legislative session, to offset significant declines in revenue, the legislature converted general fund obligations to federal funds for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. This, however, is not sustainable into the future, and the department is requesting the restoration of the essential costs for the upcoming fiscal year. The department is hopeful that the cuts can be restored to minimize any dramatic impacts to the school level. The restoration of these core services will also go a long way to meet the state's maintenance of effort requirement and allow the department to leverage the Federal America Rescue Plan Act, ARP, ESSER 3 funds for longer-term recovery needs. Next slide, please. With consistent and predictable general fund support from the legislature, the department will leverage $412.5 million in Federal America Rescue Plan ESSR 3, ESSER 3 funds to supplement school and complex area budgets to address three areas: increased health and safety requirements, social emotional learning, and accelerated learning. Next slide. Following the instructions, we have included a link to the annually produced non-general fund reports. We know last year the revenues, expenditures, and ending cash balances of these funds were heavily scrutinized and adjustments were made accordingly. These have been updated to reflect our latest projections. This is an overview of the department's budget cycle. Generally speaking, our process follows the typical cycle of other Hawaii State Executive Branch departments. For fiscal year 2023, we developed 5 main focus areas for developing our budget. The next slide will talk a little more about these focus areas. Our general fund operating budget is developed around 5 buckets. The first bucket is rebuilding the foundation by restoring lost resources. To move forward with innovative advancements in education, we need a solid foundation to provide the necessary supports to implement new programs. The second bucket is about restoring stability and assurances for those positions that lost permanent funding. This will help to retain individuals critical in supporting our organization. The third bucket addresses shortfalls, especially large shortfall areas that disrupt our resource planning, destabilize operations, and add administrative burdens. The fifth bucket represents housekeeping or small cleanup items to ensure we have categorized. I may have misspoke. The fourth bucket directs funds to advance education, which includes essential operations, student success, professional development, and workforce development. Then the fifth bucket represents housekeeping or small cleanup items to ensure we have categorized resources correctly. Housekeeping items are net zero items that represent redistribution of existing resources for improved record keeping. The next slide provides the totals for each of these focus areas. This is a breakdown of our $270 million request by bucket. The orange rebuild foundation column, $100.2 million, will shore up lost general funds due to the economic downturn. In the yellow restore stability column, $11.1 million will restore general fund salaries so that employees can be assured that their jobs are stable. In the green shortfall column, $52 million is for shortfalls such as workers' compensation, teacher differentials, and salary shortfalls for existing positions so that the department can fill positions with quality candidates. And the blue advancing education column, $106.9 million for advancing education, of which $78.3 million is one-time funding to help schools with repairs, maintenance, equipment, and other essential school operations. On the next slide, we'll go into a little more detail on the advancing education category. Advancing education comprises 4 components. Essential operations. Essential operations include school food service, school transportation, maintenance of facilities and equipment, custodial services, and utilities. These are necessary to keep our schools and offices functioning in order for our students to be successful and for our teachers and staff to have basic tools needed to perform their tasks effectively. Examples in our request include $1 million for air-conditioned classrooms, environmental sensors, which will monitor carbon dioxide, temperature, relative humidity, and particulate matter to assess and optimize classroom conditions, optimize energy use, and mitigate exposure to airborne infectious disease. Student success. The success of our students is dependent on the education opportunities provided from within the classroom to beyond the confines of the school, and the services and support delivered to ensure equitable access to these opportunities. Examples of our requests include $6.4 million for resources for a new facility so students in these classrooms will have the proper supplies and equipment. Teacher and staff development. Teacher and staff development ensures employees are equipped to address the array of student needs to facilitate student success and to strengthen their subject knowledge. Examples of our requests include $1 million for the Special Education Teacher Mentor Program. And workforce development. Our efforts around workforce development will better prepare students from elementary school through high school for the current and future workforce by providing educational opportunities that expose students to viable career paths while allowing them to gain the necessary skills for future employment. Examples of our requests include $461,000 and 5 permanent positions for a program dedicated to coordinating the implementation of work-based educational opportunities for all students. Next slide, please. In the area of capital improvement program projects, we continue to focus on the categories listed on this slide. The projects will be selected from the prioritized list the department provided to the Board of Education. Some examples of prioritized projects include, in the deferred maintenance category, projects involving repair and maintenance, electrical and infrastructure improvements, hazardous material remediation, and various renovations for school facilities. In the compliance category, projects will bring us in compliance with the Americans with Disability Act, including architectural barrier removal and gender equity requirements. What the department truly needs is support for predictable and reliable funding. This is important in assuring our schools that they will have the funds to provide the necessary educational services and supports for our students. As a former principal, base funding provided me with the confidence of knowing that I could take care of my school with my students, or my school and my students. As a principal, I wasn't really aware of the specific steps or processes and the decisions that happened throughout this budget process. What was important for me was that the funds that I had planned for would be there to allow me to effectively execute the many interdependent learning opportunities for our students and staff, as well as how it all connected the schools and students within our K-12 complex continuum. I can confidently say that in my 12 years as principal at Waipahu High School, I was never disappointed. Our funds were there, the supports were there, and thus we all worked together to implement opportunities for students that supported the My Voice, My Choice, My Future mission at Waipahu. Those opportunities that truly mattered, supported passion, and created purpose for our students and school community. Thank you for this opportunity to share, and thank you for your continued support, which is so critical to the success of our public education system. My team and I are standing by for any questions regarding our budget requests. Mahalo.
Thank you. Members, questions? Thank you, Kidani.
Thank you, Superintendent, for joining us. I had a question on, I think it's page 11 on the use of federal funds, and basically, how does the DOE plan to expend the remaining balances for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2? And I think that's about $104 million.
Thank you for the question, Senator Kidani. The presentation we had today was for ESSER 3 and ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funds, federal funding. We have definitely tapped that to support our schools. So I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Brian Hallett to provide some of the more specifics to those two funding sources. Yes, Hallett.
Okay, speaking at a very general level, we have a monthly report that we post to our website that details out all the uses and uses of ESSERs 1, 2, and 3.
We can't hear.
Oh, I apologize.
We can hear you though.
Apologies, Senator. I hope you can hear me now. I was just saying in general terms that probably the first place to look to see details of how we're using the ESSER 1, 2, and 3 funds is our monthly report available on our website. For ESSER 1 funds, the CARES funds, the report just posted recently of our spending through the end of the last calendar year. We have a balance of approximately $8.3 million left, but you can see how it's all intended to be programmed out on that report. It's a little difficult to go through all of them, but it's for things, remaining things are for special education services, for impact services for special education, for equitable services. A lot of this is special education. We also have quite a bit still pending to be spent for health and safety. I think Assistant Superintendent Tanaka's office, he has recently received $5 million allocation to help purchase PPE for the balance of this school year, as well as recently an allocation of $1 million for testing. supplies. Then for ESSER 2, we can see what's left on that report. From that report, of the $183.6 million, about half of the money has been used to date. We have $92 million left. A good portion of that money, probably the largest portion left, $54 million, has been reserved to help offset general fund budget cuts for this fiscal year. But I'm sorry, I was a little into the weeds, but you might want to peruse that report to see the other types of uses. But it's really been to stabilize and to deal with health, safety. And those programs were, those uses were defined early on in the pandemic. So a lot of it was those first responses. And it's our ESSER 3 funds where we're now pivoting into more focus on accelerated learning, social emotional learning, and health and safety.
So speaking of the health and safety, does the DOE have enough of the test kits? Because you do require teachers who are not vaccinated to test.
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Don. Currently, the department works very closely with the Department of Health, and based on CDC guidance, the Department of Health then assesses that guidance and provides guidance to us, to the Department of Education. Currently, for our teachers, if our teachers are and staff are, we do have a testing mandate within the department. So our employees are required to test, or they can opt out of testing if they are fully vaccinated. Right now, if our employees are not fully vaccinated, then they need to provide proof of testing, and that test is at their individual expense. We are looking at procuring additional tests for our schools. We do have other testing options that are available for schools, which would include OET testing or Operation Expanded testing that our schools are participating in, and epidemiology and laboratory capacity testing, or ELC testing, which are rapid antigen tests through the National Kidney Foundation on the neighbor islands and CVS for Oahu. Additional rapid antigen testing opportunities are provided by the Pacific Alliance Against COVID-19, or PAC, for schools in Nanakuli, Waianae, Honoka'a, and Kohala complexes. As of December, 174 school-based testing programs in 160 schools were established. ELC, which has been offered on the neighbor islands, has expanded to Oahu last week through CVS. And we want to thank our partners in the Department of Health for helping to keep our students and staff safe. So those are some of the testing opportunities we have. Deputy Unibasami also has been inquiring into different options with testing. So, Deputy, you want to share a little bit about that?
Thank you. And we are right now calculating the number of tests that we need. President Biden recently created a mandate that more testing solutions be available to schools. The priority is mostly for students, but however, we have, where we can, open those opportunities to include employees. And we've been able to do that in most of our schools. The idea then is that we would be able to set up more testing, a more stable testing supply in every one of our schools, including charter schools. We're right now putting in the request. We're just getting the enrollment numbers from all of the department and charter schools and putting it together into one request to CDC.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your vision for workforce readiness. It's on page 6, I think, of your PowerPoint. And I know the DOE has requested positions to address both workforce readiness and digital learning. So can you describe why these positions are necessary? And do you foresee digital learning to continue to be part of the DOE's permanent offerings moving forward?
Thank you. Yes, as far as for workforce development, we are requesting the allocation to support what we're doing to expand current offerings in the department. Currently, through our Office of Curriculum Instructional Design, we do have our CTE office, and what CTE is primarily responsible for is to looking at and assessing the standards across all of our CTE areas. We have, through working with the State Office of Career and Technical Education, expanded the number of pathways, I believe to it's 13 different pathways now. And so those pathways each have a pathway advisory councils. And those councils are comprised of our business partners, industry partners, higher education, and Department of Education teachers. And they help to provide guidance in those CTE areas and those pathways, in looking at workforce data and helping to guide so that we're confident that what our students are doing is aligned to workforce. The positions and allocation that we're requesting for is to stand up a section within the Office of the Superintendent to help to coordinate a more robust work-based learning opportunities for students, which also includes internships, mentoring opportunities, opportunity for students to acquire certificates and certifications to enable to prepare them for the workforce. As far as our efforts on distance learning, we are looking at expanding our distance learning opportunity for students. Deputy has also been very involved in that effort. Deputy, would you like to share a little bit about distance learning?
Sure. This year we set up a statewide system for K-12 for about 500 to 600 students. It varies depending on the students and families' desire to continue into distance learning. We also, under superintendent's direction, have been given direction that he would like to see a permanent solution, even after COVID is completed, that we would still have. Paul. That we would have increased the different ways that we can expand learning experiences for our students, knowing that traditional education is not necessarily the only way that they thrive. So we are working on that. The idea is that in the second year that we are looking at more of a physical presence, looking at expanding not only the core types of courses that we've been giving, but to also take a look at how might we give them other types of learning opportunities that are important to kids, such as extracurricular and so forth. So we're in the midst of planning that. We're in the midst of asking our staff that are currently running this program about their interest in continuing this work, and then looking at opening up to new positions that others that are currently tenured and or experienced teachers to hopefully join the virtual program too. The idea is that every year we get better and better at this, and also continue to expand and increase the types of ways that we can serve our children even better.
I know that with the rising numbers because of the Omicron variant now, are all of our schools able to do some kind of virtual learning at this point?
Thank you, Senator. Every one of our schools has contingency plans in place to be able to shift to distance learning and to various degrees of distance learning. The plan that we have as a system is individualized, as we all know that each school is unique in its community and its efforts and how COVID impacts each school. So we have not implemented a one-size-fits-all plan that is the same for every school, but rather what we've chosen to do is to address each school on an individual basis. And what we've been doing is that school principal, together with their area superintendent, they're monitoring their COVID cases on campus. And if cases increase, they're in communication in terms of what options are available, which includes moving individual classes to distance learning. And the reason why we're doing that is, rather than closing the whole school to distance learning, is The pandemic in prior experiences last year, it really showed us the impact that not having students in school has on our students, both academically and in their socio-emotional areas. And so we're very committed to continuing in person as much as possible. And so should there be a need to shift, schools have the flexibility to address those needs by classes. And should they get to a point where we do need to shift a school temporarily to distance learning, we also have that plan in place. But our commitment has always been to in-person learning and to support our students as well as their families. So that we remain resolved to do that and to keep as many classes open as possible. But we do have the resources and plans needed on within that scope.
Thank you for that. Chair De La Cruz, the rest of my questions are related to the budget, so I'll yield to see if members have questions on the PowerPoint.
Senator Kitagawa.
Yeah, my question's actually on the budget, so I can wait if other people have questions about the PowerPoint.
Senator Kim.
Yeah, but it's not on the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Mine is related to the budget, and it's more about the broadband infrastructure and devices. Can I ask a question now?
Yeah,
or do you
well, I just
wanna
wanted
do
to
it
follow up
after?
on what Senator Kidani asked on the distance learning. So is your vision the distance learning will have a physical location to house administration and possibly teachers, instructors, that everyone will have access to virtually? Is that your vision?
Yes, we are.
Or is it that everybody's going to have their own teachers from wherever?
No, currently there are different schools that are operating distance learning, implemented distance learning to different degrees. And one example, we have schools that are doing them really well in complex areas. One example is the Lelehua Mililani Wailua complex area and the Pineapple Academy, where they have Hui resources to support students that way. We have a state distance learning program that was developed out of the Office of Curriculum Instructional Design. What we're looking at is to bring resources together for schools and to provide a statewide distance learning program that would support schools across the state. We would need space or place to house the teachers that are doing distance learning that will be able to support our students statewide. And that's what Deputy Unibasami has been working on.
So that would be a facility so that the infrastructure, the broadband, all of those things are there. Because I would think if you live, for a teacher who lives in a rural community, rural district, and they may not have access to broadband, it's not as easy as if they had from a facility.
So as we have done this year, not all of our teachers are necessarily in one physical space or even on the same island. We found that there are ways to work with that. But the idea is that we really want to give access to students as much as possible. As we look at the next iteration, we're keeping that mindset of that while they must be in the state because of laws. We still want to make sure that we're getting the best for our children into this school, because we know that it takes a certain level of competency and comfortableness and confidence in being able to do digital learning and to use it to the best of our abilities. And so we're looking for teachers and administrators and people who to surround this program. As we move forward, we believe that it's going to not necessarily be only virtual, right? We believe that it's going to be a hybrid of learning experiences, from taking courses and content area subject matter on virtual, but there's also going to be in-person learning or experiences that are going to be out in the community. part of the design that we're talking about is convening spaces, right? Whether it's students meeting with students, students meeting with various members of that school or program. And the idea is that we not try to situate it and think of it as only Oahu centric or island bound. And that's going to be the challenge, because our mindset is really, you stay in your geographic area and it's a brick and mortar school, and really trying to break out of that and think about what will learning look like, what will the interaction between the professionals and the students look like when we're thinking beyond having to be in the same geographic area. So we know there'll be physical space needs, but we also know that we think it'll look different from what we've been doing in the past.
Mhm. So what's your timeline on coming up with at least a draft of how you're gonna map this out and your space requirements?
We've already done a estimate for this next school year, given our the 2022-23. But when we think about, and we've also projected out, what 5 years from now, what will this look like, right? And that's where we are right now. It's like, what will it look like when we're done with COVID, everything, and we still value virtual learning?
Yeah.
And what will that design look like? We've actually been listening and taking lead from some of the design work that's being done as we talk about workforce development and how that's going to change some of the learning opportunities that are going to be available for our students in the near future. And the idea is that as that's being articulated and resourced and pieces are being cornerstone pieces are being designed, then how will the virtual program also follow suit, and how does it become an opportunity to be able to support that kind of design work?
Okay, thank you.
The others check.
Senator Kim,
I'm gonna go start with,
Senator Keith Azaran, you guys are just deferring to each other.
Well, he let me go first
I
this
know the
morning,
last
so
time.
I'll let him go.
Thank you, Senator Kim. Yeah, my question on the budget is, I'm curious that you are asking to fund the differentials. I think that the former superintendent initiated, and I think those differentials at that time were funded from within the department's budget. So going forward, are you going to be coming in for the differentials every year, or are the differentials going to be folded into the base budget for those classes that you're asking for differentials on?
So for last year and this year, we are budgeting $32.5 million out of our ESSER funds, the ESSER 2 funds in particular. For next year, there is embedded within the requests, we believe it's in category 3 in the shortfall areas. We do have a request in for $32.5 million general funds. It is part of the governor's financial plan on a recurring basis. So it would be to have it added to the base budget.
But will that be classified as a differential or as part of the base salaries for those particular classes?
We are seeking it to be budgeted as differentials.
Okay, so you think that at some point the shortfall in those classes will be alleviated and you won't need the differentials?
We haven't gotten there yet. Whether it
Well,
gets,
I mean,
I think it would have to go through collective bargaining to adjust
collective
salary.
bargaining, but you're asking for differentials because you determined that there's a shortfall in those classes, though, haven't you? Or or did you just designate those 3 classes as for other reasons?
Correct. They were designated as shortfall areas, hard to staff areas, and thus the differential.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't see it as necessarily as a collective bargaining issue. The other question I had is in the collective bargaining agreement, and this is something that has come up perennially from the teachers is the compression issue. And in your current collective bargaining agreement at Article 20, Section J, there's language that seems to indicate that, I'll read it for you. The parties recognize that annual incremental step movements are a viable recruiting and retention tool. Teachers who are not at the top of the salary schedule and who have effective evaluations shall move to the next highest step of the corresponding class at the beginning of each school year. Annual incremental step movements are subject to funding. How is that being implemented?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, for the question. We have Assistant Superintendent Sean Bacon also on the line. Assistant Superintendent Bacon, can you please address Senator's question?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question, Senator Algren. So can you just clarify your question just for me briefly? I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly on your question.
You have language in the collective bargaining agreement that seems pretty straightforward. The only issue is that these annual incremental steps need to be funded. You haven't requested the funding, so I'm curious about how is this language meant to be implemented, or if it's just language that was included in the agreement and there's no intention to actually implement.
Yeah, so my understanding of that is that language is subject to funding typically through the collective bargaining process that we do with the teachers union and through the governor's office of collective bargaining.
Wait. I don't understand what you're saying. This is language in the existing collective bargaining agreement. It's been negotiated. It's been ratified by the teachers. So what do you mean by it's still subject to collective bargaining?
You know what, I'm going to probably need to look into that and get back to you on that exact question for that, if that would be okay with you.
No, I mean, you're here today to talk about your budget, and this given the fact that differentials alone are in the 30 million or so, and that only covers a portion of the teacher workforce. This language in the collective bargaining agreement would cover all teachers. So I'm kind of curious on why there's no request or what the plans are to implement it. If you say you're just going to bargain it again, I mean, I think this language has probably been in this agreement for years.
Yeah, so back in December 2020, we actually did bring a proposal to start the process possibly to the Board of Education about looking at the compression issue with the teachers. I think it is something that we need to continue to look at and figure out moving forward if it is something that may be feasible for the department to possibly ask for a funding request in moving forward with that.
Well, wait though, but you already have this in the agreement. I mean, let me ask it this way. Currently, do you have a salary schedule?
Yes, we do.
Classes? And are there steps in that salary schedule?
Yes, there are.
Then this language seems to say that as long as a teacher gets an effective evaluation and they haven't reached the top of the class, that they get a step increase. And so it's quantifiable. So I'm kind of curious. Are you just afraid of telling us what that number is so that, you know, but if it's in the collective bargaining agreement, I think I'm just curious on exactly how much this would cost us.
So in the past, like when we've done a four-year agreement.
He puts his foot in his mouth.
Sean.
Thank you.
So Senator, we did take this question from your office yesterday, and we are researching it preliminarily, very preliminarily. You're looking at Article 20, I think paragraph J, and we're looking into that and also looking at how that relates to Article 20C, which states when step movements can occur. So if we could, we're still looking into how the contract, how to interpret that, and we do intend to get back to you soon. We do have a request in parallel efforts between the Department and Budget and Finance to come up with a cost estimate in relation to your question, which was, I believe, how much would it cost if there were going to be step movements? But I think we're also looking parallel is it even possible? So I apologize.
Well,
that
if it's not
looking.
possible, why is it in this collective bargaining agreement? I mean,
I
why even suggest to the teachers that this is even something that's viable?
In general terms, I believe the way the bargaining, the contracts work, essentially you take the previous and it becomes the base for the new. And so that language just carries forward, but there's other, it has.
Oh, you mean it's been in
other
this,
portions
you mean this
of
language
the
has been there for a long time and you still don't know if this is actually a viable idea?
Yeah, again, I apologize, Senator. If we could have a little more time to do the research to make sure we're answering properly. We're looking at the implication between J and C and other implications for
Okay.
collective bargaining.
Can you also then do this, if you can respond to the chair? How long has this language been in these agreements with HSTA? So I'm curious because it is sort of perennial complaint that we get, from our friends and family and constituents who are teachers that there's compression. And I'm just curious about this language and whether or not these increases have ever been funded.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On page 167, table 19 under ARPA funds, you have $10 million plus for private school support new. Can you explain what that is?
I'm sorry, my copy goes to page 166. You're looking at page 167?
167 or 168, yeah, that you guys do.
Table 19. On the top right, yes.
Yeah, this whole bunch is table 19. The ARPA fund. Second to the
sorry.
bottom on page 167 of 168.
I see. EDM 100, $10.1 million for private school support. That's the EANS program. There is a grant. It was part of CARES funding that provided an opportunity for support for private schools as well.
Okay, so this money goes directly to the private school?
It's managed by the department. There's coordination with the private schools, and purchasing is handled and run through the department and
It doesn't go
paid
to,
for by the department.
it doesn't go to specific kids who go to private schools. It goes to the private school.
Not directly to the kids. It goes to, on behalf, the department expends funds on behalf of the private
Who
schools
decides
for
which private schools get it?
services.
The private school?
I believe there's a formula that's followed, and it takes into consideration the type of students and the poverty percentage or ratio in the geographic area of the schools.
Okay. In the media today, and I don't know if this was brought up earlier, or that there are a number of schools that have not reported the COVID numbers since December. Can you comment on that?
Yes, we have reached out to those schools, Senator. The schools we are working with them. We are responsible to submit that, and I extend my sincere apologies for those numbers not being there.
Who monitors that? Because it is the law, right?
Yes, it is. And we are following up with the schools. They are updating those numbers. Schools have, as a result of COVID, they have been inundated currently, more recently with Omicron. And but again, no excuses. My apologies for that. We are working to get those numbers updated as soon as possible. I'm not sure exactly the total number of schools that have not submitted,
You said
Um,
like 48, was that?
48 schools. So yeah, we are following up with them through the CASES. We're also looking at how other ways that we can provide supports to the schools and looking at how those numbers are being reported to address um, workload issues on the principals.
I guess what's troubling is that, this is January 12th already, and this is from back December. So it's like somebody's not on top of it to let it get out of hand to the point where the media picks it up. And you see it in the media, whereas I don't know who's monitoring it to see on a weekly basis or it is being updated, but.
Yes, we are following up, and we'll be sure that those numbers are in moving forward and those corrections are made. And it'll be updated and continuously monitored to ensure that those numbers are current.
Your security is done school by school, and are they employees of the school, or do you folks hire a contractor for your security for your schools?
School security attendants are hired. They're classified employees, and so they're hired through our school budget.
Okay, so it is by schools. It's not statewide.
For school, the school security attendants at the school.
Statewide.
Yes, school security. The school security attendants that's hired at the schools are DOE employees, and they're hired through the department.
Okay, and there's two more questions. One, you're the chief procurement officer for DOE.
Yes.
Correct. And during our procurement meetings there was a concern about whether there was a conflict, because at the University of Hawaii, the president said, well, I'm also the president and I'm the chief operator. I got to do what's best for the school, which means if they got to violate the procurement code, he's not going to stop it because he's doing what's best for the school. Is that a problem with the DOE? Is that a problem you have with the conflict on having to rule whether or not a procurement might be beyond its scope and you let it go because it's in the best interest of the school? Or as the procurement officer with your hat said, you're violating the procurement code?
No, we do have, well, I know ASL it oversees the procurement office within the department. We also have an internal audit section in the department that does monitor.
Right, but at the
those
end of
things.
the day, if there's a conflict or something, it's going to come to you for a decision, right?
Yes.
As the chief procurement officer. So do you find that you have that conflict, or that you should continue to be the chief procurement officer, or it should be somebody else that could look at it more objectively?
For me, I don't see it as a conflict, Senator. If we need to address something that needs to be done, we'll most certainly take care of it and make, and do it. ASL, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more.
If I could just add that there are additional checks and balances and although being chief final decision maker, there are opportunities for appeal and protest. So there are some checks and balances built in. It's not.
Right. But yeah, it's in all the procurement.
There's controls. I think
Yeah,
is important.
those controls supposedly is there for all procurement, but it's just that, during our special committee, we've heard that. And so it was kind of troubling that the president would make that statement, like, he's going to do what's in the best interest of the school and not necessarily what the procurement officer should be doing. So I was just wondering if that's the same thing at DOE. No, so that was okay. Finally, I've received a call, and I know I've contacted you, Superintendent, regarding and not even my constituent, happens to be Senator Fogala's constituent, but certainly has been calling all of us and concern about us not being and protecting our students, especially those with special needs. He has a daughter with special needs and felt that he is not. That DOE and the schools have not made an accommodation for his child. Can you at least give me, I know it's probably a longer answer, but some brief answer regarding that?
Sure. Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'm aware of that particular case that you're referring to, and I've personally looked into it. And while there are student privacy issues that I'm not able to discuss in a private forum, a public forum such as this, I can assure you, both you and Senator Favela, that everyone who is involved in this case, from the school level to the complex area to the state office, has done everything reasonable to ensure that this student receives an appropriate education. I'm happy to take this conversation offline and to expand more into it if you need additional detail.
And I assume you have documentation documenting some of the
Yes, we do.
conversations and actions that might have been taken along the way.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify the differential. So my understanding is the contract has the hard to fill positions. And then but Superintendent Kishimoto had a separate policy, not necessarily a board policy, I guess her office policy or superintendent's policy for special education and Hawai'i. Right?
So maybe I can clarify, because I use the word hard to staff. There under differentials, there's 3 categories. You're right, special education and Hawaiian language immersion. But there was also, as you mentioned, in the contract, hard to staff areas, geographic areas. Under the differential program that we've been going through for a few years now, there are additional areas added to the hard to staff list, but they're all technically hard to staff, and that's thus the differential to try to attract to fill vacancies.
I think we should be clear as to what's really in the contract and what's added by the superintendent, because that because as was mentioned, if it's in the contract and that's due collective bargaining, then we have an obligation. But if it's above and beyond, then now we have to prioritize with other needs.
So there's, I guess, 2 types of hard to staff, geographic hard to staff. There was the areas that were identified in the contract for which we already had funds for. And then there was an expanded list.
No, so when you budget it,
enhanced.
when in your budget request, you should separate the 2.
We're only asking for the enhanced. We already have the funding for the base amount. So we've considered that or factored that into the cost estimate, and we can work with your staff and pull out what is in our base already.
So
the contract
But
differential.
the board approved that last time without making it part of their budget request. Or before you came to the ledge, the board had approved that.
That's mostly, the board approved it before it was in the request, but then at the next opportunity to make the request was made. And so I remember the first year of the pandemic, that there was the bill moving through the session. It made it through 3 committees and it stopped in House
Okay,
Finance.
so when you
'cause
end up trying to map this out and you do all the hard to fill, then who's left? So then you might as well just like a part of the overall collective bargaining picture. I mean, what, 2 people are gonna be left after you do the hard to fill?
Yeah, the superintendent and
Well, apparently, yeah. Anyway, okay, I guess we'll just wait to see what you guys come up with. Senator Mr. Lucia.
Aloha, Superintendent Hayashi. So at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a mad scramble to secure the necessary resources, devices, whatnot. And I remember you've had to do some creative thinking to even get things to the more rural areas. So I just wanted to get your assessment of whether the situation has stabilized. Are we on a good system? I just wanted to be assured that our kids really do have the necessary devices to ensure that they're equipped to do distance learning.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Each of our schools have contingency plans that would enable them to shift to a full distance learning mode of teaching and learning. Schools did do an assessment on the number of computers that they have and access to number of students that would require access to the internet, and working through our Office of Information and Technology Services. We've ensured that students have those opportunities. We also have Assistant Superintendent Christina Shaw on interim Assistant Superintendent Christina Shaw on the line. Shaw, is there anything else you'd like to add related to the senator's question?
Hi, Senator, thank you for your question. So as Superintendent has stated, it's a combination of both school and state supports to get the devices and connectivity to the students. From the state level, with regards to the funding that we had to essentially purchase, in the first phase, we did focus on the low socioeconomic students and purchased over 52,000 devices. We are currently still awaiting some additional devices under ESSER 2 funding, and we are purchasing a little over 14,000 devices for that. We have about 126 still pending due to some supply chain issues. From the hotspot side, we had ordered early on over 17,000 of those devices. Those are still out in the schools. We worked with the complex areas to determine if it was a direct drop to the schools or if the complex area wanted to be able to manage where those go. So they're there, and we are continuing through this year to pay for the connectivity, the data plans, and the online security, cybersecurity piece that's needed. We are also working with the schools on another federal funding bucket, which is called the Emergency Connectivity Fund, to see which students have documented eligibility in terms of families have indicated they need some assistance with that, and we're going to be placing orders to help them with that as well.
Have we had any challenges as far as stewardship of these devices with the kids? I know how kids are, so.
Yes, I don't necessarily think it's out of the ordinary. So we have had a few that we are aware of where, they'll come back and we'll need to look at if we have any reserve in the complex area to issue out. Sometimes you'll have missing power cords, or something is just not functioning. It's not a large number, but we will continue to work with them on that. The hotspots, as far as I'm aware, are still out there. We had a few that came back due to a recall that we were working on, but we've been pushing those back out again as soon as we get the replacements.
So not all the students are equipped with the device, right? For those that can afford it, they can use their own. Is that how do we determine who gets a tablet or a computer versus somebody who may not need it? Or is everybody equipped with it? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So for that, it's really something that is managed at the school level. I am aware of a few schools that just said, we have enough. We are going to give it to all students.
I see.
Yeah, and then others may be looking more of and looking exactly what you said, right? Who needs it versus who may already have, and there are some parents that are just like, nope, I wanna use my device for my child. So it really is managed at that school level to determine how to best to push those resources out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Senator Favela, you have a question? Senator Kidani?
Thank you. My page numbers are all off. I'm not sure, but I will ask the question. There were 3 new schools that in EDN 100 request for weighted student formula for these 3 schools, Ho'okele Elementary, Honouliuli Middle, and Kihei High School, for a total of 1.24 million. That the governor is not recommending funding for. So, and this is for the, we're talking about the budget for next year's school year. So what are the current estimated enrollments for these 3 schools that are opening? And how are we going to fund this without the governor's approval? I mean, I don't know why he did not. Is this because there's no enrollment yet or what?
So sorry, it's going to take me a little while to pull up the enrollment numbers. We can certainly get those to you. But what I want to explain is, you recall we have 5 priorities in our budget. the first three are around restoring and shortfalls. That fourth area is what we were calling advancing education. And so this is one of the advancing education requests. We went in for a total of about $55 million in that area, of which the governor's budget, when all was said and done, we were able to fund about $23 million of those items. So this was one of those items that was not able to be accommodated within that $23 million. If it's not funded upon implementation, what will happen is that we will take our weighted student formula pot, which is almost $1 billion, and we'll spread it across the areas we have, which will essentially require us to take from the value of one, or take from per pupil funding, in order to provide, excuse me, base funding for these three schools, which is what the request was for. So we certainly, we would like to get this funding, but it just wasn't able to be accommodated in the budget when the governor put the budget together few weeks back.
Yeah, so my concern is what percent of every school's budget will be affected by weighted student formula if you're moving it to these three schools that are not going to be funded?
The rough math that we do is, I believe it's for every $1 million of the budget that we have or don't have, it has about a $6 impact on the value of one student. So essentially we'll be taking $6 from all students funding in order to cover this, in order to put these dollars or to provide that base funding to these three schools, roughly.
Yeah, and so the larger schools may not feel it, but the smaller schools are certainly going to feel it. So I think we need to take a better look at this and what we're going to do if we cannot
happy to
find
work
the
with you.
funding for this. Also, the executive budget only appropriated 18 FTEs for school nurses, but the DOE requested 33. Is this additional positions, or are these positions that are already there but are not going to be funded?
Thank you very much for the question. We also have Assistant Superintendent Heidi Armstrong on the line. Yes, Armstrong, can you respond to the Senator's question, please?
Sure. These would be additional nurses that would be part of DOE staffing. And we are working to expand our internal capacity while maintaining the very valuable, long-lasting, and we want to continue our partnership with the Hawai'i Keiki program. So we're looking to build our internal capacity while maintaining our partnership with our Hawai'i Keiki nurses.
Thank you for that. My follow-up question would be, are there even 33 school nurses available in the state?
That's a great question. And I think if we can get them posted, we'll find out the answer. I will say that as Hawai'i Keiki has been doing their recruiting, and because of their stellar reputation, they have received applicants for their postings. So we're hopeful that would continue as we try and expand providing these nursing services to all of our schools.
Thank you. There was some details on the proposal for teacher housing on from the new state facilities agency. It's page 20. Anyway, I can't find the page number. Yeah, so can you provide some additional details on that proposal?
Yes. Assistant Superintendent Randy Tanaka is also online from Office of Facility Operations. Yes, Tanaka, can you respond to Senator Gidani's question, please?
Hello, Senator Kidani. Regarding the teacher housing, the 40 million that is from the governor's budget that really came directly out of there. My initial understanding is that it's focused on West Oahu. My discussion with Mr. Sniffen, we mutually agreed that we hope we can take a broader look at not just West Oahu, but the areas of most immediate need. The intention is to try to leverage up that 40 million with some of the things that DOT is doing for the developers in these areas, so we can maximize and maybe get a plus up on the funding that's there now. That's what I know of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess I can't actually, this is the school facilities agency. I think that's all the questions I have. for now.
I just wanted to go back to something you said in your PowerPoint. So you have new programs and initiatives that you're funding with ARPA funds, and then you're at some point, partially now, you're going to ask for some general fund to continue the programs, and then next year you're going to ask for general fund to continue some of the new programs started with ARPA funds. Is that correct?
Okay, Senator, thank you for the question. So I just want to be sure I understand it correctly. So you're asking whether we'll continue to utilize general funds for programs that we started with federal funds.
Yeah.
The federal funding, the ESSER funds are included in school plans at the school level, are included in school plans that they work together with their area superintendents. So as the schools implement those plans and it moves forward, the funding may change depending on the need of the school. It's a hope that the funds that are utilized to initiate funding for those federal funded initiatives would continue. It's also, though, important for schools to take a look at the sustainability of those programs and think about that as they're creating their academic and financial plans as they move forward.
Okay, so the schools did not use those funds to cover shortfalls. They use it to start new programs.
So I believe if go ahead. Yeah.
Because if you cover a shortfall, then I can kind of see you coming back to get general fund because you had the money before.
So this year we are using a portion of ESSER 3 funds to cover shortfalls. Going forward, we mentioned earlier about pivoting and focusing on those priority areas of accelerated learning, social emotional, as well as health and safety. So as we can look at the ESSER funds of helping us bridge a gap in funding temporarily, we're also looking at the ESSER funds going forward to help bridge that gap because of the learning losses and to get us back to a baseline. And that's sort of the sort of vision or concept behind it. We are cognizant of sustainability, but this is supplemental funds to help our students catch up, to help the social emotional needs, and to address the health and safety. So these are really pandemic responses, and they're detailed out in the department's ESSER education plan that was recently reviewed and approved by our Board of Education back on December 16th.
Yeah, I guess at some point though, if you had a breakout of what's to cover shortfalls, what's your spending on new programs, and then what is it going to cost us to sustain the new programs, in addition to covering. Now, when ESSER ends, we're gonna have to fund those shortfalls. So then we're gonna have to cover the shortfalls, and then on top of that, add the new programming.
So the general fund budget requests, we talked about the 5 priority areas. The first 3 are, a lot of that is restoring, converting positions that were converted from general funds to federal funds temporarily to rely on the ESSER funds. If those are funded, that would reset the base budget. We're looking at the federal funds as being supplemental to address those learning losses and pandemic impacts.
Yeah, but how of those supplemental programs, how many are new programs that you want to keep going?
I think we're gonna see how successful they are, and that's something we know budget and finance and the legislature, the standard approach is federal funds, it's temporary, don't assume that it's going to be recurring or it'll be restored. And yet we still anticipate we will learn many lessons over the next 2 years and through these programs and incorporate what we can within our base budget. I can't promise at this point that we wouldn't want to come back and share some of those successes and perhaps expand various areas, but we cannot assume that would be entertained. And I think that's been communicated by both budget and finance and historically by the legislature. If that's what you're getting at.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's just unknown until you figure out what you want to move forward. But I would think you would want to use some of those money. I understand the shortfall, but I think you would want to use some of those monies for one-time costs. So for instance, you're talking about distance learning or digital learning. The one-time cost to put all of those things up, at least I know that's a one-time cost. We can get that over with versus having new programs that are not necessarily one-time costs.
Yeah. So in looking at the ways that the complex areas working with their schools are using the monies, what we're seeing is that when we talk about the learning loss, it's really about loss of opportunities because of COVID and loss of progress, right? And so this idea of accelerating learning is how are we acclimating students back to coming back to school, in-person learning? How are we prioritizing the areas of needs that are being seen? And in the ways that the schools and complex areas and the state are responding to it is that the assessments that were given at the beginning of the year gave us a baseline of what were the needs, right? And what we saw were that students that already had needs that we were trying to address with services and programs that supported vulnerable learners. What we also noticed was that there was an increase in the number of vulnerable learners, right? The pandemic created more needs. And so some of the programs and services that were already in place and established in the schools, what we're finding is that we need to expand it, increase the number of students that it's going to serve. We might have to scale it for a while, a temporary while, in order to serve more students. We're also taking a look at things like whether or not we need to look at extending time beyond the school hours or the school walls in terms of serving students for longer periods of time. And over time, what we're going to need to figure out is how much of that we will be able to mediate during this time that we have the ESSER monies. How much of that is going to extend beyond the funding that we get from ESSER? And I think that's where you're coming, is really thinking about what are the programs and services that we're going to need to keep going beyond the ESSER funding. But our hope is that if we use the monies correctly and well, and we address the needs of our students,
the long-term costs are minimal.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. In EDN 150, there was a request by the department for almost $10.5 million for increasing student medical needs and the hourly rate of reimbursement. This, and the governor only funded, I think, $274,000. But isn't this totally reimbursable by Medicare? Medicaid?
I believe you're looking at the skilled nursing program area and maybe, yeah.
Assistant Superintendent Armstrong, can you respond to, please, to Senator Kidani's question?
Right. This is our skilled nursing services, and we contract out for these services, and they are very difficult positions to fill because our current rate, and I'm trying, Brian, if you can tell me the year that's on there is based on it, it's a very outdated rate that they're paying them. So what we're trying to do is put in an updated hourly rate for these very valuable positions. And in turn, we are able to claim for Medicaid reimbursement for these services as appropriate. But these are usually one-to-one services with very fragile students. And at the rate that we are offering now, it continues to be a challenge to find qualified providers because the pay rate is so outdated.
And Heidi, you asked for that, what it was based on. It was from 2006.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the legislature has worked with the department on this, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years, for a while. And finally, the department has, come around to realizing, that we should be doing the Medicaid reimbursements. And to have the governor not fund the request to pay for the services is baffling to me. So I think this is something we need to work a little bit harder on. Anyway, it's not that we can't, we have to provide the services.
Correct.
Get the reimbursement if we don't have the positions to provide those services.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You start with one, you're gonna end up with 10 questions.
I know, it's just baffling to me. We worked long and hard on this, so.
So Heidi, is it just the fact that the pay differential or the pay is too hard to hire? Or too low to hire?
Yeah, we have a contract for these services, and we're continually working with our contractor as we put in our request. And it's very clear that the difficulty in getting personnel lies in the hourly rate that is in our current contract. So as we continue on with this contract, we're requesting to increase that hourly rate so that we're able to attract these people in these positions that we need. And our hourly rate, again, is based on a 2006 hourly rate, comparable hour. And right now, people aren't taking, positions that offer that kind of money.
So what steps is the department or the board taking to ensure that the contractor increases the salary?
Well, we need to pay that contractor. So we're trying to increase the salary in the contract so we can continue to attract high quality people.
So your existing contract is still based on the 2006, or is it on modern?
Correct. No, it's based on the 2006.
So that's what I'm asking. When do you amend the contract?
We're renegotiating the contract. Right, we're in the process of doing that.
It's because if this is really, once it's amended and you can hire, then we can, and when we spend the money, we get reimbursed.
Yes, if the all the criteria for reimbursement is met, yes.
And if we don't, we get sued. Because we have to provide the services.
So what's the timeline on amending the contract?
Brian, on that page, it shows the expiration date of the current contract. We're in negotiations now. I think it's June. I'm going to have to get back to you on when we are finalizing the contract, but I do know we are in the process of renewing the contract as we speak.
I believe the old rate was about $50 an hour. The budgeted rate or the assumed rate was 90, but we'll know within weeks what the actual rate is when those contracts get finalized. We can follow up with you once we have that additional certainty of what the actual increase is going to be.
Okay, but if it's still not, if it's still not to the point where the contractor can hire, our liability just increases.
Well, it's not only that, it's part, if you look at the budget request, they're including the data analyst to provide the work to be able to have the program to do the reimbursement. So we're doing all that, but we're not putting the money in to pay upfront the services which are going to be reimbursed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense.
And just to let you know, when the new contract will go into effect, it's July 1st. So I just got that information. So we're working on it now to get it finalized by July 1st.
Okay, so the $90 versus the $50 is what the contractor is telling the department is sufficient to attract the people we need so that we can provide the service and then get reimbursed for that cost.
The $90 is a comparable rate for similar services.
Okay. Okay, but do they believe that that's what will be able to allow them to hire?
In our
Because we're getting-
conversations with them, the difficulty they say is the rate that they're able to offer the applicants. So that is the sticking point.
Because from the reimbursement point of view, it doesn't matter if it's $90 or $100. We're getting reimbursed for the entire amount. So why don't we try to be competitive since we know we're going to get reimbursed?
That's what we're trying to do.
You know what I mean? Like, don't go on the low end. We're going to get reimbursed anyway. So that the contractor is not in a position where they're desperately competing with other agencies and other medical providers for that particular position. We should probably go on the higher end of the spectrum to attract them, because we're going to get reimbursed anyway. Anyway, I hope you guys consider that.
Competitive versus market.
Yeah. Because if not, we're just delaying the inevitable. Because if the contractor has a hard time, then we're going to have to have this conversation again, and we're moving it up. But we're going to get we're going to get reimbursed anyway. If it's general funds, okay, I can kind of see.
We'll work on it, Senator.
Senator Favela.
Yeah, I know Senator Kim spoke of this. The only question that I have is parents. This individual, I worked with him for a while, even though he said it was 2 days, but I'm Portuguese, I don't work with nothing on 2 days. So going forward, I just want to know, how can we get these parents that, no matter what avenue and how much we give them, all the information, does the DOE have some kind of counseling with the student and the parents to have an equal medium? I don't like saying mediator, because the parent is doing a lot of talking. I never talk to the child. I don't think Sean talked to the child. I don't think you talked to the child. But there's any way of the part of bringing the child and the parent in and finding what really is best for the child. Because I speak for my daughter a lot. And if it wasn't for me realizing, not taking my daughter back to school, how important it was to socialize, with all the fights we was having in Campbell, to make me realize that these kids had some bad social skills. They couldn't be in an area too tight and too crowded.
His
So we
position
started
went
fighting.
180.
Yeah. But only because I witnessed it. I was in the middle of a
Yeah.
big melee.
I mean, not in a bad way.
Yeah, in a good way, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that I understand the frustration of this gentleman,
Yeah.
because I had the same paranoia, sending my daughter her junior year without the doctors clearing her. So once the doctors cleared her, I still had animosity, but I tried it. And she loves it. I think this is the best year she ever had in all her life, her senior year. But I don't want to exclude what, this guy is reaching out to all my colleagues now, but I want to know, what does the DOE have to try to, again, I don't want to use the word mediate, but try to reach a point that you can talk to the parent and the student to try to come up with the best program for the special needs that they feel is collaboratively correct. Because when Sean told me that we have an online statewide program that my daughter was going to go on until she got the clearance, I thought that was a great program. That's the program that his daughter is on now, but he doesn't feel that is being effective enough for her learning. So I just want to know, to the point that you know, that he doesn't call the rest of the 20-something other senators, what is the point that we can have a person like this to work with?
Well, I think that's what you're working on though, right? Trying to figure out I mean, his example is exactly what you're saying. All these tools now have to be relooked at, and how you can come up with.
Okay.
I think that we're speaking about a particular instance, but I want to make it clear that what we're looking at is improving the program, because we know that what we put in place was necessary for that point in time.
Yes.
However, we've gotten a lot of insights and we're moving to another level, and hopefully people who experience the program see that also. When we're talking about specific instances of parents and their expressed needs and wants for their child, there are times when we're not going to be able to accommodate every single desire. I think I can speak for the principals and the CASs that the student does come first, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it may be contrary to sometimes what a parent may be saying, because of the evidence that they may have as they experience the child themselves too. So please know that while there may be conflict around it, our goal is to always try to resolve it. But sometimes we may have very different perspective of what is in the best interest of that student.
But in the meantime, like you're saying, if the parent is frustrated,
Yeah.
Do you, as you train, as you have
Mm-hmm.
developing the transition, who does the parent share their frustrations or comments on?
Any parent can share their opinions and their perspective with anyone in if they're with a school with a complex area. And there are times when we actually will engage with subject matter experts. So if it's about a special education student, we have asked Heidi Armstrong and her shop to help engage. And what we're really looking for is expertise on helping us understand the situation and what might be required, and then being able to offer, right? I will tell you that sometimes even that offer may not necessarily meet the wishes of the parent, but we do engage and we do try to work something out.
Okay, well, maybe if they felt they went through the different levels and they're still frustrated, then you guys can contact you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, Armstrong, would you like to share a little bit too about services that are offered to parents?
Sure. And Senator Pavella, I think you mentioned mediation. Mediation is an option, but also getting facilitators to have a facilitated meeting. And that kind of keeps the balance. And you were saying, sometimes it's all one-sided, but a facilitated meeting might help keep the balance so that the conversation can be back and forth rather than just, hearing from one side. But those are two options that could be successful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I mean, at some future point, I don't want to prolong the meeting, but the 64 million in the R&M, the SFA is not necessarily built up yet. These are projects, obviously they're R&M, so they need to be done sooner rather than later. What would does the department have a position on how you're going to go about doing this? Where is there an MOA between SFA and DOE, where DOE for now would end up completing the work?
Assistant Superintendent, Randy Tanaka, I know you also had another meeting you have to go to, but if you're still on, are you available? Oh, you're right there. Can you answer the
Yes.
senator's question, please? Thank you.
Yes, so there's a kind of working relationship that we've developed with SFA, primarily new construction, new schools, and there's a list of them, Coal Ridge and Kihei, that they're kind of focused on, and also teacher housing, fundamentally from ground zero up. And then we're taking care of the facility maintenance issues. For example, roof leaks. We deal with the roof leaks. Breaking sewage lines, we deal with that.
But what about the 63 million? Because that's in SFA's budget right now.
63 million? No, I think they only get.
So let me clarify. In the governor's budget, he added $78 million of one-time money, originally characterized as R&M. Through conversations, it evolved to more just any essential support for school on a one-time basis. Of the 78 million, the department programmed out about $15 million of one-time needs, things like resources for new facilities, $6.3 million, and several other items. There is a balance of $63 million, and I think that's what you're referring to. And so that is in the EDN 100 budget, not EDN 450.
Okay. So is there anything left in the 450 that, because they're not up and running, so.
I think
Senator
what
De La Cruz,
is
it's a million in there right now for staffing. I think it's 4 staff positions or 3 staff positions.
Okay, so
four-
the CIP then is to EDN 100.
there's 2 items, I think, or 3 items, I think, for 450. The first one is $1 million, as just mentioned, for staffing. There's also $40 million in the CIP budget for GO bonds, which we believe is to capitalize the special fund. So then we see a $40 million special fund ceiling in the EDN 450 operating budget. So there's 40 million CIP and bond funds and CIP, 40 million, a special fund, which we think it'll capitalize that fund in addition to the 1 million staffing.
I think the 40 million is for teacher housing, intended for teacher housing.
Okay, but if SFA is not up and running, let's say if even the teacher housing, there's an opportunity, is there at least an MOA between SFA and DOE where DOE would do the work in the meantime?
That is being engineered as we speak.
Okay. Okay, I mean, if it's internal and you guys have it covered, that's fine. If not, we have opportunity to introduce legislation to make sure that something like that can occur.
Okay, if I may, Senator, I will get together with Ed Sniffen and I know we've started that MOA discussion. I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody? If not, thank you very much. Adjourn.